Well, welcome back. Welcome back to James Tunbridge and Ryan Abbott. This is Christian Gordon-Pullar, the third of our series of podcasts. And for those of you who are wondering, how is it possible that subsequent podcasts were all wearing the same clothing? It's because we recorded them all on the same day. So keep smiling. So we're back for our third. Perhaps this one we're calling Philosophy Meets Policy, the slippery slope in the advancement of AI, in the lackadaisical progress of legislation and the public interest. So I'll kick this off, I suppose, by asking, if we were to grant AI even limited IP rights, and I know, Ryan, that you never suggested that that would happen, but I think that's the slippery slope in the heading of this particular session. What do you think we might be inviting in terms of broader claims of AI personhood, liability at one end of the scale? You know, you talked about Waymo and self-driving cars, which works great in countries like America with straight roads and block systems. Not so well for countries that have very old roads or ones that were bombed during the war, like England, where you can't even find a taxi driver to navigate down them without hitting something. What do we think about proprietary control over AI outputs, leading to manufactured scarcity of innovation? And some of those thoughts, Ryan, as the expert Darbus on this panel, kick off.
Thank you. Well, speaking for myself, I always wear exactly the same outfit, irregardless of the passage of time. And if it makes you feel better, the Waymo cars aren't that great in the US. But they're getting better. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. Could you grant AI rights, and should you grant an AI rights? And again, you know, it's never been part of the cases that one could or should grant an AI rights, but people have been thinking about it. I mean, in response to the first question, could you? The answer is certainly yes. It's not an uncommon thing that not human beings have rights, right? Governments aren't human beings, corporations aren't human beings. You know, in some countries, animals have rights. You know, in the UK, the animal rights regime is a series of restrictions on human beings to not do things to animals. The animals themselves don't have rights per se, but other jurisdictions, animals do have rights to be free from example from certain sorts of cruelty. There are other jurisdictions that give, you know, things in, you know, Britain we would think of as little less usual, you know, India, certain South American jurisdictions, you know, grant legal personality to temples or, you know, rivers or so on and so forth. So, I mean, could you? Yes. Should you? Well, I've yet to hear a compelling reason why you should. So, you know, take a self-driving car. A self-driving car may well cause an accident, and if it causes an accident, you have a victim who needs to be compensated. How are we to deal with that? Well, I mean, the simplest way is that these are all commercial products, and so if you have a Waymo self-driving car that injures someone, you should just have Waymo be responsible for it. Or some complicated interaction between whoever human was supervising it and a person who walked out in front of a car or what have you. But that works a whole lot better. It puts the company behind the AI or the person behind the AI kind of responsible for ensuring its safety. It has deeper pockets for compensation. Could you give an AI limited legal personality and have it say hold an insurance policy? Well, you could. It could work. It just seems needlessly complicated. And
can I pose in a question on that? Because I've actually had to take part in discussions on what you just touched on. So I'd love to have your input on the fact that let's take doesn't matter what the label is, a driverless vehicle. Mm-hmm. First of all, who owns the vehicle? Do they still purchase a vehicle like they do when they drive one, or do they only lease it? And if they do, is it the company that you lease from? Then, if the system that operates the car has a mapping system, is it the company or the entity that supplies the information to enable it to drive that should be responsible? Or finally, should there be a mandatory insurance taken out by the person that leases the car, or the lessor, or the mapping company? I mean, these all seem to be the permutations. What do you think?
I think this is oh, sorry, Christian, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's interesting because having spent a year with an insurance broker provider in the UK, and I cannot profess to have any insurance expertise or proficiency, but having been exposed to that question, I totally agree that is the key question, James. And I think the balance will be depending on the regime. So America has, let's say, fewer regulations around certain insurance products, whereas the UK and Europe have far greater regulation. I think there'll always be a divide there. But you're absolutely right that if you were to grant rights to AI in any limited form, you probably wouldn't do it where there was death or personal injury. Just as in the law generally, we can't exclude death or personal injury. You might want to make sure that that is someone who is actually a human being, a company, or someone you can hold responsible. Otherwise, the only consequences might be just switching off the AI, which, of course, it's not going to make it.
Do we not need to go back to the fundamental question of why do we even need to? So I pick up one thing from Ryan's comments and back to you. When Ryan was talking earlier about animals, I was thinking about the interesting case of the, it's probably not a monkey, but a type of monkey that took its own photo. And then there was the big debate about whether the photographer who owned the camera could claim the copyright, but he didn't press the button. So the question then really became about, well, why do we have the rights? Well, we have the rights to create something and to protect the creator, to encourage them to create more and get an income. You didn't need to do that with the animal. Do you need to do it with the AI? To my mind, this all comes back to, so long as a human being or a corporation can get the protection to encourage further investment and further creativity, I can achieve that with the AI having personality or not. But do you agree? Is that where we need to get to? Is how do we ensure that the reason we have what we have at the moment for intellectual property just works in the AI age?
Well, yeah, so I agree. We should be looking kind of basically at the purpose of these laws and what best accomplishes that. And that's the reason we have artificial people in the form of companies, because we think it offers human beings various incentives to structure certain economic activities in that manner. And it can. In answer to Christian's question about, VAI could be a very complicated concept. There's lots of stakeholders and integrators. This is not an uncommon problem with product liability. You have a car that has a defect that injures someone, but you have 18 different companies involved in sourcing the parts, where the part went wrong. And so the short answer is, in the US, you just have a manufacturing supply chain that's liable to a consumer, and they, work out liability amongst themselves, and they have contractual indemnification agreements. The long answer is it can be complicated. But here, could there be a reason to make an AI directly liable? Yes. Have I heard a sensible proposal for it yet? No. On the monkey selfie case, I think it is a similar sort of thing. I mean, so I think there are some analogies between that and AI art. There is actually a commercial market for animal art. Zoos train elephants and gorillas to make art, and people pay for that. Do the gorillas need the copyright? No. But do the zoos need the copyright to get people to train animals to do art? Yes, that would help that market. Does an AI need a copyright? No, no one's ever thought that. But do human developers need copyright to train and use AI to make art? Yes, sometimes at least. So, you have to kind of give some thought to where the incentives are and what behavior you want.
Well, that's interesting because, in that example, and I think I really like that balanced feedback. I think in the case of the zoo, I think that's a perfect example of where you need to think about the entire economic ecosystem around the particular problem rather than react to it. In the case of the monkey, I think the monkey would be very happy to be paid a banana as compensation for giving back the camera that took it, and probably consenting should it be able to do so. But as a joke concept, when we look at the public benefit versus the individual or the corporate benefit, you can certainly see in our last podcast, we talked about, gazillionaires, quintillionaires versus everybody else having to maybe do different things and arriving at a sort of common basic income. What do you think, and I'll end with this question for both of you, what do you think is your nightmare scenario versus your best case scenario in this potential timeline where philosophy meets policy and we go, well, where do we want to end up? And I'll just give you mine in 10 seconds, which is I wouldn't want a world where I have to be compensated by a company that can only pay me in AI time. In other words, I have a compensation loss, but the damages are paid to me by doing or having a robot pay me in terms of time, which otherwise a human might have done or a company might have paid for. That's a nightmare scenario for me. And the best case one, of course, would be where each one of us has a personal AI assistant that no one else has access to that data, and they only assist you and help you to generate income whilst you're asleep. That would be a best case scenario. James.
Would you like to go first? Well, I guess me. So, I tend to ground everything in the why are we doing any of this question. So I think that overall society, and I don't just, and I mean, when I say society, I mean both what's good for people, but what's good for the economy, which tends to drive things for people more broadly. Certainly in the West, it's been more successful than other forms of state-controlled government. And as a result, I think the starting place has to be, are we fit for purpose to continue to encourage people and companies to invest in new creations, whether that's inventions or copyright or otherwise? And on that journey of creation, are we balancing the interests of those that have created before with those that are creating now? Now, to my mind, this is largely a question of the mechanics of licensing and the law, and what we've talked about in previous podcasts, potentially developing so that AI is recognized as a pathway to creativity, but that it's still something that either a person or a company can make use of, and then they can make some sort of benefit for society through taxation or creativity or whatever. And I think the last piece, to my mind, in all of this is that on that pathway, AI itself has to learn. And I think it's important to have some recognition that you're standing on the shoulders of others. And Absolutely. I think if we ground everything in rewarding creativity so that it can translate to societal benefits, whether that's through taxation or something else, that's what makes sense. And to protect people, I suspect insurance is going to be a really important thing, because there'll be some kinds of risks that can only be dealt with effectively through an insurance system. Last point for Ryan's benefit, not sure whether he knows this, or for anyone who's watching this that likes science fiction, Britain has had the MIB, Men in Black, for much longer, but here they're the Motor Insurance Bureau. They basically cover uninsured accidents, and maybe we need that for the AI community.
That's an interesting point. Ryan?
Oh, I'll try and be brief. Either AI becomes superhumanly good at things, in which case it's going to replace us, or it doesn't. If it doesn't, then, it's just another tool effectively, and I think we can deal with it. But if it does become superhumanly good the way an increasing number of computer scientists seem to think that it will, my nightmare scenario is that all of the benefits of that flow to 5 people and not the rest of the world. And my utopian vision is that the benefits of that are somewhat egalitarianly distributed. I, for one, can think of plenty of things to do with an unlimited amount of time and resources that don't involve pointless work that an AI could do better than me. So, we'll see what happens. It's an exciting time. It's an interesting time to be alive.
Yeah. And look, thank you to James and to Ryan again. And next time we'll be talking about governance and international action, and perhaps we'll be disagreeing passionately about harmonization of IP laws around the world. Thank you again.
Thank you.